Sometimes I feel like this whole thing was her second chance, you know?
Secrets, lies, and shattered memories. Surface is a psychological thriller that keeps you questioning everything. Welcome back to your nerdy show. I'm your host, Spoiler Master. Sophie thought she had the perfect life until a near-fatal accident wiped her memory clean. But was it really an accident? As she unravels the truth, she discovers a web of deceit, betrayal, and an identity that may not even be her own. With shocking twists and a finale that changes everything, Surface Season 1 left us with more questions than answers. And now, the mystery deepens, because Surface Season 2 is officially coming this February 2025. Before we dive into what's next, let's break down everything that happened in Season 1.
To connect with the patients, hear their stories. They all felt like they knew you right away.
Ictus. Sophie wakes up after a near-fatal accident with no memory of what happened. Everyone says she tried to take her own life, but something about that doesn't sit right with her. Her life looks perfect, so why would she do that? As she tries to piece things together, things start feeling off. Her friends seem distant, her clothes don't feel like hers, and a mysterious man, Detective Baden, warns her that her husband, James, isn't telling the whole truth. Then she finds a video of herself and Baden. Turns out she was having an affair. Things get even weirder when a Coast Guard tells her that after the accident, she claimed someone pushed her off a boat and that her name isn't Sophie, it's Tess. So what's the real story?
When exactly were you going to tell me that we were fucking? Or was that piece of information not relevant to your investigation?
Muscle memory. In Surface Episode 2, Sophie dives deeper into her missing memories, turning to hypnotherapy. She recalls a shadowy figure watching her fall off the boat. Was she pushed? Her therapist, Hannah, dismisses it as her subconscious justifying the supposed suicide attempt, but Sophie isn't convinced. She's growing increasingly suspicious of James, her husband, especially after learning there's no record of his supposed work trip to Portland. When she tries to dig into their finances, she finds herself locked out. James later admits he had to file for conservatorship after her accident. Instead of going on a getaway with James, as Hannah suggests, Sophie sneaks off with Caroline to their vacation house. While horseback riding, she has flashes of a mysterious woman named Tess and what seems to be a past accident. Meanwhile, Baden keeps investigating and retrieves a USB stick with GPS data, potentially linking James to something shady. Back home, Sophie discovers James was supposedly at an investment summit in Portland, but he's nowhere in the event photos. Then, she overhears Caroline secretly warning James about her memory returning. Panicked, Sophie runs to Baden, who urges her to come with him. He has answers.
I have no idea. And even if I did, I never would have discussed it with him.
New person, same old mistakes. Episode 3 of Surface dives deeper into Sophie's tangled past. She confronts Baden about their affair, but he flips the conversation to evidence against James. Turns out James bought a plane ticket before her accident but never got on the flight, and his GPS places him near the pier. Suspicious, right? Sophie thinks he should be arrested, but without solid proof, it's a dead end. Things get messier when Baden mentions a burner phone, a Sulky one Sophie finds hidden in a yellow bag. It's filled with steamy messages, proving her affair was intense. Meanwhile, James is acting shady too, checking her computer and hovering around her constantly. At work, he's also in trouble, as an internal investigation is sniffing around missing money. Sophie later learns Baden isn't even officially assigned to her case. He's undercover narcotics. Despite his lies, she trusts him. Adding to the drama, Caroline confesses she once slept with James, making Sophie's accident feel like a fresh start for everyone. At a party, Sophie watches James crumble under financial stress. When Baden shows up, James doesn't recognize him, meaning he never knew about the affair. Still, Sophie, convinced James tried to kill her, kisses Baden again, reigniting their fling. Psychogenic. At the halfway point of Surface, Sophie is still lost in the fog of her past, but she's done playing the helpless victim. Instead, she's leaning into anger, desire, and rebellion. She aggressively pursues both James and Baden, while pushing back against her therapist, Hannah. Impatient for answers, Sophie turns to a shady memory recovery clinic, ignoring Hannah's warnings about its dangers. Since James controls her finances, she sneaks behind his back, pawning jewelry for $15,000. Her first session, floating in a sensory deprivation tank, triggers scattered memories but nothing concrete. Determined to take control, Sophie seduces James at the hotel where they got married, playing into nostalgia to get him to open up. It works. After a steamy night, he confesses to owing $11 million, and she records it. She rushes to Baden with the info, but he's hiding his own secrets, like blackmailing James's IT guy. Things take a turn when Hannah confronts Sophie about the clinic. Turns out Sophie's mother had a psychotic disorder, making memory recovery treatments risky. Furious, Sophie refuses to believe James is looking out for her. She's spiraling, but one thing's clear: her real self is starting to break through.
You've been there for me through everything.
It comes in waves. Sophie sits by the beach, reflecting on what her therapist Hannah told her. Her mother had a psychotic disorder, which might be hereditary. As she recalls joyful childhood memories, Baden joins her. She confesses she's tired of pretending with James, and Baden reassures her that he's close to exposing James's crimes. That night, Todd, an IT guy working for Baden, delivers copied data from James's laptop, but it turns out useless. Todd then mentions a second laptop James always takes home, prompting Baden to break into James's house while Sophie and James attend a gala. Meanwhile, Sophie, desperate to recover lost memories, secretly takes hallucinogens from Baden's stash. At the gala, she confronts James about his affair with Caroline and manipulates him to steal his phone so Baden can break in. As the drugs kick in, Sophie hallucinates paintings moving, drowning in a portrait and a mysterious woman from her past. She stumbles through the city in a daze, ending up at the harbor, where she nearly jumps into the water. The next morning, she wakes on a bench, suddenly realizing something. Ignoring Baden, she storms into James's house, demanding the truth once and for all.
Let me go! What? Why?
The Myth of California. Episode 6 of Surface takes us back to where it all began for James and Sophie. James, struggling with money and feeling like an outsider at work, meets Sophie at a bar. They hit it off despite his attempts to impress her with a borrowed lifestyle. She sees through it, but they bond over their shared ambition and deception. As their relationship deepens, Sophie starts building up James's reputation with outright lies, pushing him to double down on their game. His friend Harrison grows suspicious, warning James about Sophie's mysterious past, but James brushes it off. At their housewarming party, Harrison confronts Sophie, and James overhears her saying she's just trying to deserve him. Over time, cracks start forming. Sophie cheats, James finds out, and in a moment of weakness, he sleeps with Caroline. When Sophie flips the blame on him, James ends up apologizing. Things spiral further when he realizes Sophie has been secretly hiding money and planning to leave him. After she disappears at the pier, James, desperate for a fresh start, covers up everything. In the present, James confesses he'll always love Sophie and suggests they move past it all. But can they really?
Not really starting over, is it, Sophie? It's just running. But it doesn't matter.
It was always going to end this way. Episode 7 of Surface kicks off with Sophie back in therapy, convinced she really did jump off that pier. But did she? She confides in Baden, asking him to hold off on exposing James's fraud, but things spiral fast. James gets pulled into a financial crimes investigation, while Sophie learns that Todd was the one who snitched to Baden. Meanwhile, she tries and fails to withdraw $3.1 million from an account under her alias Tess Caldwell. Baden, ready to expose everything, gathers his evidence, but Sophie considers confessing instead. She finally tells Baden she stole the money, hoping he'll back off. In a twist, he suggests they run away together, but before she decides, Sophie learns that Baden was actually hired to investigate her, until he got personally involved. James, seeing him as a threat, physically takes him down and destroys incriminating evidence. Later, Sophie starts remembering a shadowy figure at the pier and wonders if Baden pushed her. That night, a battered Baden gives her a USB with proof she fell off a boat. Someone was there, but it's unclear who. Soon after, Baden's apartment is ransacked, and he's taken out in a body bag.
The money in that account isn't money James stole.
See you on the other side. Episode 8 of Surface kicks off with Sophie running. Still haunted by Baden's murder, weeks later, she visits his empty apartment, barely holding back tears before heading home, where James is deep in conversation with Inspector Seeger. The detective believes Sophie's jump may have been intentional and urges her to dig deeper into the truth. Meanwhile, James confronts Harrison, hinting that he might have played a role in Baden's death. Sophie, struggling to move forward, throws away old belongings and leans on James for support. At therapy, Hannah is pleased with her progress, but later that night, Sophie's facade cracks. She calls out Harrison at a work event, then later, Her things are found near the bridge, leading everyone to believe she may have taken her own life. James soon discovers a letter from Sophie, blaming him for Baden's death. But things take a turn. Caroline's missing millions? Sophie might have taken them. A hidden storage unit leads her to a mysterious contact, Eliza Huntley. By the end, Sophie fully embraces her test persona and escapes to the UK, where Eliza greets her with a cryptic question. What are you doing here?
And you know what? I get it. It's not a good look.
Jesus, will you fucking
I
slow down?
told you not to get involved.
Our nerdy thoughts, from hidden identities to deadly secrets, Surface took us on a mind-bending journey where nothing was as it seemed. By the end of Season 1, Sophie, or should we say Tess, vanished into a new life, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions. Who is Eliza Huntley? What really happened the night Sophie fell from that boat? And just how deep does the conspiracy go? With Season 2 arriving in February 2025, we're about to get some answers, and probably even more twists. Stay tuned, because the story is far from over.
Really think this was gonna drive me away? See, that's where you're wrong.
Now what the heck, I'll laugh anyway.